V-Rising is a survival crafting game that puts players in the shoes of a vampire who's looking to rebuild a lost empire. Here are our 7 beginner's tips to navigate the early game of V-Rising. Chances are your first death in V-Rising came at the hands of the giant fireball in the sky. Yes, just like all pieces of vampire fiction, the sun plays a major role in this game, given the fact that you're a bloodsucker. A vampire's main weakness is sunlight, and this remains true in V-Rising. Essentially, you want to stay in the shade as much as possible. Even if this means getting under a tree, you need to stay under any form of shade during the daytime hours. However, the sun moves with the clock as the day goes on, so your shady spot won't always be safe. To combat this issue, mainly in your base, you can construct a mist brazier. When filled with bones, this structure emits a mist that stops all sunlight from penetrating through to a certain area. Filling your base with these will ensure that you can continue to work in your base throughout the day. If you want to go out into the wilderness, then stick to the trees. One of the earliest tasks you have to complete in V-Rising is crafting different kinds of gear. From armor to weapons, this gear will allow you to gather resources and fight enemies more efficiently. Speaking of efficiency, you want to learn the different traits each piece of your gear possesses. For example, if you look at the axe's traits, you'll see that it has a 25% bonus damage to lumber. Basically, this means you want to use your axe to chop down any trees. The same goes for the mace and stone, the sword and vegetation, and the spear for combat. The spear is arguably one of the most important items to craft in the early game. V-Rising doesn't have a specific mission for it early on, leading players to believe the sword is the best weapon for fighting enemies. However, the spear has 25% bonus damage against enemies, making it the best choice for combat. You can craft it at a workbench using copper ingots. An underappreciated aspect of V-Rising is your blood type and your overall blood level. At the bottom of your screen, right in the center, there is a sphere with blood in it. This determines what your current blood level is, and you want to keep the level as high as possible to ensure you don't start withering away and lose health. You can consume rats and feed on enemies if they're at a low enough HP to restore your blood levels. Feeding on enemies can also change your blood type. You can see which blood type you currently are by hovering over the sphere of blood on your screen. Depending on the enemy you feed on, you can alter your blood type, all of which offer different bonuses for various situations. For example, if you feed on a worker type enemy, your blood type will change and increase the amount you gather and mine out in the world. To feed on an enemy, get them to a low portion of their HP and then hit E when the game prompts you to feed. You don't want to do this with other enemies around as you're vulnerable and can be hit during this process, although you can also interrupt it if you wish. Feeding on an enemy kills them, so it serves 2 purposes. Once your base is up and running with the castle heart, you can begin to craft different stations. One of these stations is called the Blood Altar, which is a vital addition to your base. The Blood Altar is essentially V-Rising's boss tracker. By interacting with it, you can see all of the available bosses in the area you're currently in. These bosses are able to be tracked, provided you meet the level requirement to take on the boss. After you start tracking them, you will see a blood trail start forming in the air. This blood trail points in the direction that you need to go to find the boss you're tracking. While it's a bit finicky at times, following the blood trail is usually straightforward. Follow the direction it's facing, and with enough luck, you'll stumble across the boss. As you defeat more and more bosses, more content will be unlocked for you back at your base, and also the boss you've defeated will unlock different abilities and skills for you to use. Unlike other survival crafting games such as Valheim, the map in V-Rising isn't procedurally generated. Instead, there are set locations for all points of interest, bosses, and other places in the game. If you open the map, there will be different yellow circles marking exactly where you can find various points of interest. You'll need to explore the map in order for it to become clear and present the points of interest. Markers will also pop up as you discover different locations like caves and teleporters. But one of the best features of the map is that you can see which resources are available in the different areas of V-Rising's world. Hover over the points of interest to see what might be located there if you decide to venture out. Of course, some resources like leather or a whetstone might still be difficult to come across even with all this information. But luckily for you, I'm going to tell you exactly how to find and craft whetstones and leather. easiest and perhaps earliest location you can find whetstones at is bandit strongholds. These are points of interest on the map, which are marked by the yellow circles I mentioned earlier. Now, not every point of interest will be a bandit stronghold, but there are a couple in the starting region of Farbane Woods. Once you find one, clear out the bandits that are there and loot their bodies. These bandits occasionally drop whetstones, so make sure to take as many of them out as possible. In the location itself, there will be several lootable items scattered across the ground and other parts of the stronghold or camp. There will usually be a few whetstones able to be picked up, though some locations might hold more or less of the resource. After some time in V-Rising, you will gain the ability to craft your own whetstones. The crafting recipe is tied to the boss Grayson the Armorer, who has a level requirement of 27. Now, the first step to adding some leather to your inventory is to craft the tannery station within your base. But before you do that, during the early portion of V-Rising, you'll stumble across wolves, bears, and other animals. Now, when you kill these animals, they will drop animal hide. You'll want to store as much of this animal hide inside of a chest at your base because it will be vital later. In order to gain access to the tannery, you will need to kill Keely the Frost Archer. Once that's done, the tannery is found under the refinement tab of the build menu and requires 8 planks and 160 animal hide to craft. Now you can start making your own leather. You have the ability to craft new pieces of gear and additional base items. If the sun doesn't kill you, then V-Rising's enemies will surely force you to respawn once or twice. There seems to be a chance for any leveled enemy to spawn anywhere on the map, and this can present a huge challenge for you if you don't understand how enemy levels work. If an enemy has an orange or red health bar, then they are considered a higher level than you. While you can probably still fight and kill these enemies, it will be difficult and consume quite a bit of your HP. If you run into an enemy with a skull by their name, they're considered a much higher level than you, and you should probably tuck your tail and run. One common enemy with a skull by their name that you'll likely come across in Farbane Woods is the stone golem. If you're unlucky enough to see them, your only choice is to run fast and far. So there you have it, our beginner's tips for V-Rising. For more videos like this one, make sure to subscribe to GameSpot on YouTube and check out our written guides over on GameSpot.com. You can find me on Twitter, I'm Lucy James Games, and we'll catch you next time.
Call the militia! Help! Vampire!